invite Dr. Namkishore Kabra, who is Chairperson, Neonatology Chapter of Indian Academy of Pediatrics and Consultant Neonatologist and Director of NICU Surya Hospital, Mumbai. And co-chairing with him is Dr. Rishikesh Thakre, who is Director, Neo Clinic Hospital, ex-Chairperson, Neonatology Chapter of IIP and writer of many books. Please take over, sir.
Yeah, a very good afternoon to you all. Indeed, it is a pleasure and a privilege for we now begin the session 3 of the NNF Perinatal COVID-19 National Online Conference. And we have 4 presentations which have been lined up. And request to the delegates is to make their questions in the chat box. We shall take the questions at the end of the session. We start with our first presentation, and may I invite Dr. Mangala Bharti, who is currently the Professor and Head Department of Neonatology at the Institute of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Madras Medical College, Chennai. And the title of his talk is COVID Moms and Care of the Babies, Adopt versus Adapt, Learning with Time. On to you, Dr. Mangala.
Good evening, everyone. At the outset, my sincere thanks to seniors, teachers, and NNF for this opportunity, for sharing our experience and learning from everyone. Tamil Nadu actually, obviously, at the present situation comes next to Maharashtra. Usually, I think we are number 2 for something else. We always fight with the number 1 Kerala for as far as the health indicators are concerned in a good way. But it's very unfortunate that we are facing this worst COVID pandemic as of now. For those who don't know much about our unit, this is an Madras Medical College has got 2 major neonatal units. IOG Chennai is an exclusive intramural unit. This hospital caters to around 15,000 plus or minus 1,000 to 1,500 deliveries every year. We don't take any extramural, and so just neighboring unit is the Institute of Child Health ICH, where the symptomatic patients, extramural patients, are getting admitted. One good thing that happened, I should say, for Tamil Nadu is that actually we were a little bit behind Maharashtra and Delhi in terms of the numbers. So we had reasonable time, and government had enough time to put things in place and to prepare ourselves. So what I'll be presenting is just only because our data starts only from the month of May, unlike Maharashtra, where they started having cases from March and significant numbers in April. So we were in total lockdown almost till the end of April. Only by the end of April, the relaxation, especially in Chennai, the relaxations started a little bit. So mainly we'll be presenting the data of May and June for the past 2 months, where we are seeing a relatively high number of patients. So this data will be about, so all the newborns were born to COVID positive moms admitted in our hospital. So till date, starting from 1st of May, we have around 390 pregnant women admitted in our hospital. And the policy is that not all pregnant women are screened. It's not a universal screening. So the policy keeps changing over time, depending upon the situation and resources. When it started, some universal screening happened for some time. Then it was about screening only women who are coming from high risk and containment zones. And right now, actually, the policy is that only symptomatic women are getting tested, even if they're coming from high risk zones. Asymptomatic women are not getting tested right now. And of these 390 pregnant women, fortunately, I think, except one who had features of a mild pneumonia, had some findings in CT, who had to be put on oxygen, but she did well. After a week, she recovered. So all other women had only very mild to no symptoms, like a little bit of fever, myalgia, sore throat. We did not have anyone who had to be put on a ventilator, and we did not have even a single mortality in all these 390 pregnant women admitted to our hospital. So when we started, we were, so the policy was that all pregnant women who are getting admitted in a hospital with a COVID positivity, the recommendation at that time was to keep them in the hospital for 14 days. So we thought actually we will have an opportunity for the newborn to stay for 14 days and we'll be able to complete this standard recommended testing, doing a testing on these 3 days, day 1, second between somewhere between 3 and 5, and then on the 14th day. But as the numbers started increasing, so early discharges had to be made. So hardly we have any data on the 14th day swab. So primarily our data is about the swabs done on the day 1 of life and around day 3 to day 5. And all these are nasopharyngeal swabs. These swabs were done by our DM residents, and all are by RT-PCR. Going into the numbers, so the hospital thought about initially authorities discussed the possibility of creating an exclusive perinatal COVID center. But looking at the numbers and the proportion of the pregnant women who are likely to become positive in the city of Chennai, so it was dropped. So we don't have any exclusive perinatal hospital in the city of Chennai and Tamil Nadu. So all the hospitals are catering to both COVID as well as non-COVID. So the number of deliveries are fairly in line for the just as I said, for the past 6 months we have had close to 6,000 deliveries. The numbers are remaining the same. This is in addition to the COVID deliveries what we had till June, around 259 deliveries. So in the month of May, something like 1:10. For every 10 normal patients, we had one COVID patient, and but that increased to something like 21% in comparison in the month of June. So again, the same numbers in the form of a graph. So the orange ones are the COVID patients. So the COVID unit was established in the month of April. So we had time during lockdowns to establish the NICU and a separate COVID unit within our premises. From May, this cases started coming in. We had 92, which increased nearly became double in the month of June. And we have around close to 40 patients in the month of July in these 10 days. Okay. So this is just to show that this graph is in line with what is happening for the whole of Tamil Nadu. So you can see it has started in May and then going up in June. We have just entered July. So the number of pregnant women is also totally in line with what is happening as far as the whole of Tamil Nadu is concerned. Just a little stratification, what kind of birth weight and gestation the babies we had. This is only about the babies born to COVID positive mothers. So we out of this 259 babies, we're very fortunate that we didn't have any LBW so far, and only a small number like 3 and 5 babies are between 1 to 1.5 and 1.5. Predominantly, we had babies more than 2 kg. So only 3 babies in the 28 to 32 weeks. So this is our results actually. So here actually I have not mentioned the timing. I'll show the timings in the next because it was a mix-up. When we say the first swab, it is not that the first, we were not able to take the first swab always by the end of day 1. Because so in reality, what happens is that only in mothers who are coming to the hospital with a COVID test, which happened to most of the moms, because the testing started happening in the containment zones. The health workers, the corporation health workers have done the testing. So many mothers were referred with the results, test results, so that we knew whether they were positive or negative when they dropped in. But there is a proportion where that they came in late stages of labor. They did not even have symptoms. They were from high-risk zones. So we took testing for the mother. The mother delivered, but the reports were available only after next 2 or 3 days. And some of these mothers turned out to be positive. Till the time they were kept in the routine area, that created a lot of problems because so many people got exposed to those mothers. In fact, most of the health workers in our hospital, actually, I should say, got infected from the routine unit, the so-called non-COVID unit, rather than from the people who were working in the COVID unit. So when we look at the first swab, the positivity rate is around 7.6% in the month of May, but that jumped to around 16.9 or nearly 17% in the month of June. When we repeated the testing, by around after 3 days, so only around 3.2% remained positive, whereas that number again was quite high in the month of June, 9%. There is only, I'll say, only one baby in the month of May, which had continued to have positivity even for four tests. Only the 5th test became negative for the baby. But this is just by the time of life, the stratification. So when you look at the number of swab done in day 1, so we had only less than 1% positivity in the 0.7 and 0.4 in the month of May. But again, these numbers jumped 11.5%. So this number to us is was little surprising. So even though it's done in around 24 hours, still horizontal transmission is possible. But this raised us the question of okay, so is really are we facing some vertical transmission happening, because close to 11.5% of the babies born to COVID moms in June had their swab positivity happening in the first day of life. So I think that led us, we have started another small study where we are working on trying to evaluate whether the transmission is happening vertically. We'll be sharing the results later. And the other column, you just see that we had 6 babies in the month of June where they continued to remain positive. Day 1 was positive, and then up to day 5 they remained positive. But ultimately, so we were repeating a swab in an interval of 2 to 3 days, even though they were remaining asymptomatic to start with. So there is a small proportion, around 3.6% of the babies, who showed persistent positivity for some time and became negative only beyond the first week. This is very, very reassuring. I think the same, almost even people from Maharashtra presented the same experience. All these positive neonates we are talking about, these babies, none of them had any symptoms. All babies remained asymptomatic. Only we were doing the swabs to see for the testing. We had only one baby where the baby was asymptomatic at the time of delivery. So beyond day 3, around 4th day of life, the baby had some lethargy, we had suspect sepsis, but this baby was admitted to the COVID NICU, where the baby was treated for a bacterial sepsis. But this baby's repeat swab turned out to be negative by around day 7. That baby ultimately became all right. We don't think the symptoms which happened in this baby is because of COVID. So coming to COVID NICU, so we had a separate COVID NICU running. So, but the admissions in COVID NICU just for the reason that the mom was COVID positive, and we had 17 admissions so far. We had sick babies, but the sickness is mainly because of other illnesses. We had HMDs, meconium aspiration, birth asphyxia, all kinds of babies. We had some cardiac babies also, babies with congenital malformation, major heart disease, and surgical babies, 1 or 2. So around 9 required respiratory support. But this is again, so far not even a single baby who has been admitted to the COVID NICU, despite our repeated testing, had become positive. All these babies were negative for COVID. So really, the COVID NICU is totally a negative NICU so far. So that actually even prompted us, because we were not able to provide the same level of care in a COVID NICU because of the shortage of manpower and various resources in COVID. So what we did, some 2 babies, we just shifted the babies back to the routine unit, non-COVID. If they are continuously, we waited till day 14. If 3 swabs done till day 14 are negative, we shifted these babies back to our unit for a better care, and they did well. Some babies had to be shifted to a cardiothoracic and the pediatric surgical unit, which is in the neighboring hospital. So surgeons very much insisted that we need to do a swabbing not only for the baby, but also the mom, father, everybody. So only when everyone, so we had so 1 or 2 babies, that baby, one cardiac baby was remaining asymptomatic, wasn't prostin, but we had to establish negativity before shifting to the surgical side. So it's coming to the challenges we faced. I'll just quickly go through. I think most of it has been covered already. In the establishment of an COVID ward, one thing what we did, I think, which really helped our team, is that this COVID unit is an exclusive building, separate building. We had an opportunity of a building which is totally away from all the other buildings, where the labor ward and the OT, labor ward is in ground floor and OT is in first floor. There was a lot of discussion where to establish the NICU, and we were very particular that as we all know, that as the risk of transmission from neonates is much less. So we assumed that all our team members will be safe if we have an area which is very much a little bit away and not along with the OG units or the delivery units. So fortunately, we had a space in the second floor. So ground floor was a delivery room, first floor was the OT, and then we took the second floor, where only this COVID NICU was running, and there were no moms and no deliveries were happening there. So that is again one of the reasons why even till date, none of the residents or the nurses who have worked in this COVID NICU had turned positive. We have a very high number of health workers turning positive in our hospital, nearly around 25 people, including all cadres, but all has happened outside the COVID NICU and none from the COVID NICU. And we wanted to limit the number of people who are working there. So all that we had is just only 2 residents working in that. So in 12-hour shifts, one for the morning shift and one for the night, will take care of all the calls as well as managing the NICU. The same way, only 2 nurses in 12 hours shift. And we actually, this was not in line with the OG team. Actually, the OG team was working for 5 days and taking an off of around 2 weeks. Our people are working for a week and then taking weeks of quarantine. Wearing as people are working for 12 hours, initially we had a lot of problem with the PPEs, as others also as reported. We had even postgraduates painting there because of the excessive heat and sweating in the routine PPE. So our supplies were reasonably good. So we encourage like frequent doffing and donning. So for delivery, attending deliveries and all, they do repeated PPEs, and we have arranged some rooms where they can come out and they can doff their PPEs and take rest in between. Initially, we tried a lot to separate these babies from the mothers. We used some cribs to have this 6 feet distancing from the mother. But I should admit that it was very, in reality, it was not happening, because most of the times the babies were, after feeding, the babies were kept along with the mother, or actually the attender who was the birth attendant was taking care of the baby. Also, we tried providing N95 masks to the mothers, but the scenario didn't permit going by the numbers, so they were provided only surgical masks, both for the mother and the attender. And all babies were given only exclusive breastfeed, no separation and no other type of feeding. As I said already, and we also had, so we had time to establish good hand washing facilities and workflow designs. Negative pressure, totally it was not possible or feasible to install negative pressure, but we were able to create hand washing and oxygen lines and gas lines. We used incubators as much as possible within the NICU. Around 4 incubators we had, only some other 2 or 3 were warmers. When the numbers exceed 4, then only we're using warmers. And we procured some Phoenix helped us in making some of these shields with portholes, which are used for intubation and sampling. We were able to provide a portable X-ray machine, as we had to. Fortunately, we had one more extra machine, but we couldn't provide ultrasound or echo facilities. That was a challenge in sick babies, actually. The major problem which we faced and we are facing even now is the number of people available. So neonatology gets stuck in between obstetrics and pediatrics. We don't have any pediatrics in our hospital. This is only a hospital which caters to obstetrics and neonatology. So government provided extra hands. The extra hands either went to only obstetrics or pediatrics. So the pediatrics said they themselves were running short of people. All the pediatric residents who were working in the unit were taken away. So we were forced to run only with the DM residents available. Thanks to them, only because of the real COVID warriors, they helped us. So they worked in 12-hour shifts for a week with 2 weeks quarantine. And their major concern, as a discussion happened about the mindset also. I think despite the best of the efforts, people are facing a lot of pressure. Rather than thinking about themselves, they think a lot about the members in family, especially elders and kids at home. So what we provided was, apart from the quarantine facilities, actually we had good hotel accommodations and food provided made from our kitchen also, and good food coming from the hotel. We had a separate accommodation for people who are working in the normal unit, but who thought that better let them stay in the unit. They don't want to mingle their families, as long at least till this when the numbers were quite high. So we were able to convert a few rooms of our unit, so where we asked our residents to stay even though they're working in non-COVID areas. So that fear of infecting the other family members reasonably was managed. So still, we were not able to provide human milk bank services to the COVID area, because despite the best of our discussions, We couldn't find the logistics, how to transport milk, where to store, where to deliver there, who will take it every time inside. We didn't have personnel to do that. Even now, that is a handicap for us, because our milk packing services are running well in the normal NICU, but it is not catering to the COVID NICU as of now. The technicians they are the ones who are taking the swab for everyone, but as far as neonates are concerned, they totally refuse, saying that they won't touch the neonates. So again, residents helped us. We trained our residents in taking the swabs. But with the kind of swab what is available right now, it is not technically difficult, because most of our babies are, even in smaller babies, we are able to take swabs without difficulty.
Could you
Attenders were a big problem.
mind,
We were
Dr. Mangala?
worried a lot, because attenders are not screened. So every mother has a birth attendant who is staying in taking care of the mother and the baby inside. That attendant is not screened. One thing we found was actually our number, the positivity even became high whenever it is somewhat proportional to the number of people staying within the unit. So that forced us to take a policy of an early discharge of late. Early discharge has bring down the number of babies getting infected a lot. And as in other units, we are still not able to bring in hearing screen or metabolic screen in these areas. And obviously, our academics has taken a big beating, which I should again frankly admit that for the past 2 months, it is zero. We are not able to focus anything in academics. Only it is about day-to-day running with the least number of whatever hands we have. Just clinical day-to-day management is what has happened. So I think this is my last slide. And even after, I think I'll summarize in terms of all these babies, what we faced had, even despite having around the positivity reaching even up to 17%, we did not have even a single baby who became symptomatic with COVID positivity. So these questions which we try to answer, which are trying to find answers from the beginning, I think these questions are still remaining, and these have become much more important now to say that, okay, so do we need to do these so many tests in the neonate? So what are we going to actually achieve by these repeated testing in the newborn? Because at times it leads to more stay, because if they are positive, we are keeping them. As of right now, we don't have the guts to discharge a positive baby. The baby stays there for a longer time. And just like what has happened in other things, like we are contemplating, like should we go ahead only if somebody turns symptomatic even in the neonate? We are not sure. We don't have answers at the moment. And as I said already, we are studying the perinatal transmission. The 14-day follow-up, we just we gave a call. We followed up to all the almost around 72% babies are covered in our follow-up over phone. All the babies are doing well, but only very few have reported for 14 days. So the numbers are very few. That's why I have not shown the 14 days data here.
Thank you, Dr. Mangala.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. May I invite now Dr. Sushma Nagia Madam to start with the presentation. We are running a little late, so I request Madam to be quick and brief as much as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will be speaking about the experience at a hospital which is both COVID and non-COVID, and I'm really grateful to NNF for organizing a meeting like this. So our neonatal unit at Lady Hardinge really has about 14,000 births every year, and of which we have something like 700 to 800 VLBWs in a year and almost 140 to 150 ELBWs. And there's heavy burden of unbooked and referred cases, and that's what leads to sometimes even up to 50% are referred cases. Neonatal unit is about 80 bedded with annual admission of approximately 4,000. And of them, nearly 2/3 are preterm, up to 70%. The unit adheres to good NICU practices, early initiation of enteral feeds, promotion of mother's own milk, judicious use of antibiotics, and family participatory care. Mothers are freely allowed in level 3 NICU, and amongst those who are admitted with us, antibiotic usage in general is around 25%, overall survival to the tune of 96%, preterm survival more than 90%. And incidence of ROP requiring treatment is very low, so also BPD incidence is very low. The COVID journey really started in India on the 30th of January, and we had the first case in New Delhi, of course, not a mother, on 2nd of March. And within Lady Hardinge, we had the first case in later half of March, but that wasn't a pregnant woman. So the first COVID suspect mother was there in the April, second week. So if you can see this black dot, this is where Lady Hardinge is, between 3 red dots, which are the COVID hotspots. So we are in between Sadar Bazaar, Chandni Chowk and Nabi Karim. So that's where we are located. So the biggest challenge for us was creation of specific areas. And in the hospital, red area where there are positive patients, orange where there are suspect patients, and green where there are non-suspect, since it was a COVID, non-COVID facility. Then creation of separate triage areas which had flu OPDs. Pregnant women who came with a test which was positive were referred to designated COVID hospital, because we were not a designated COVID hospital. But those who were suspect, of course, they were entertained there, and if they turned out to be positive, they had to stay there. So we had to have place for pre-delivery and post-delivery, taking care of such mothers. And similarly, we had to have a designated OT for COVID or suspect COVID, and a designated OT for non-COVID. Similarly, the birthing area. And we had to have separate teams for non-COVID areas. Of course, there were no offs for any residents or nurses because the number of people were so less. And as somebody else earlier also mentioned, the pediatric residents were taken off for pediatric services. So we had very few residents, and who were mostly our DM residents. National testing, I'll not go into that. We were following the national testing guidelines, next one. But for pregnant women, those who came from cluster or containment area or from large migration gatherings, they were tested even if they were asymptomatic, if they were in labor or they were likely to deliver in the next. And no emergency procedure was denied because test couldn't be done. We earlier established RT-PCR in our hospital. Thereafter, CBNAT and TrueNAT was also available for screening. So as per NNF, there should be 4 areas: COVID suspect mother, COVID positive mother, then COVID suspect mother's baby who's requiring admission, and a COVID positive mother's baby who's requiring admission. Obviously, we didn't have the luxury of so much space, so we could only create 2 spaces that you see in the pink color in the second row. So one was a COVID postnatal ward with healthy babies, and they were kept with a healthy attendant. They were not with the mother. And another one was a neonatal COVID facility where the babies who required admission to the NICU were admitted there. And this was a separate neonatal COVID facility apart from the usual NICUs. Okay, so the babies were tested only if the mother was positive, and not if not every baby was being born. During this delayed cord clamping, as far as possible, skin-to-skin contact was encouraged, and rates have improved as compared to before. Earlier, our obstetricians were very wary of this. And for protective gear for COVID suspect deliveries, of course, the residents were wearing full PPE with N95, and for non-COVID, it was partial PPE with N95 masks. Rooming in our hospital was not really possible. So because of the space constraints and huge wards which had beds very close to each other, and there was rapid turnover of mothers who were mostly discharged within the first 24 hours. So as to provide mother's own milk to these COVID suspect or confirmed mothers' babies, we had separate lactation counselors who were designated to visit the areas where suspect or confirmed COVID mothers were being housed, and manual expression of milk, or wherever possible, there were dedicated breast pumps which are available. So breast, and you can see these containers, which are actually the sterile containers in which you collect samples. In this, the milk was transported to the postnatal ward where there were healthy babies. So also for the NICU, where there were babies who required admission and were born to mothers who were suspect or COVID positive. You can see our counselor in the PPE helping the mother to express the milk. And okay, feeding, we encouraged mother's own milk feeding. If that was not possible, babies more than 34 weeks received formula. Who were less than or equal to 34 weeks received PDHM or the donor milk. Okay, so counseling session by our lactation counselor, social distancing, and this, as you can see, is the area where mothers are housed. Regarding discharge and follow-up, stable neonates were discharged by 48 hours of life. All the mothers were discharged earlier. Family was counseled regarding breastfeeding, hand hygiene, droplet precautions, and danger signs. Sick babies, of course, were managed in neonatal COVID facility, and immunization, there was no disruption. Permit mothers for donation if they had fever, cough, breathlessness, or they had contact with a confirmed case. Otherwise, mothers were welcome into the milk bank for expressing the milk and even for donation. So collection, processing, and supply was really not affected to that extent. Okay, so my main aim was to keep the team morale high, and there were lots of concerns why we should be posted here. What if we get infected? So fear of getting infected. Do we have adequate protection? Do we all need PPE? Fear of unknown. I have kids and parents at home. Can I cuddle my babies? What if I get infected? I'm myself senior enough, diabetic, hypothyroid, so on and so forth. So what do? Should I be posted in this area? Should I take HCQ prophylaxis? So these were all many things that our staff, including the nurses, the counselors, as well as our residents had this. Do we have accommodation facilities? I have cough and cold. Should I get myself tested now? Should I wait? I can't. One of my residents said I cannot wear PPE for 6 hours or so. So I'm going to do my duties without any PPE. Let whatever has to happen, let it happen. We have to really counsel him to get him into the PPE and do the work. So how did we do this? Every day we had a morning huddle for few minutes where we discussed last 24 hours status, regular motivation and encouragement, and creation of 24/7 work groups where we were doing quick resolution. Which mother's report has come? Has she turned positive? Is this a negative mother? Her baby should be shifted where? And so on and so forth. So our experience till the 30th of June from the middle of April, so that's like 2.5 months, there have been 1,200 deliveries, which is much less than what the usual number of deliveries are. We have almost 1,200 per month. So in the later half of April, there were 240 deliveries to all mothers, 49 COVID suspect or confirmed. In May, 492, almost half of them COVID suspect or confirmed. And in June, more than 2/3 who were COVID suspect. So out of 1,200 total births, 600 were such where COVID was suspected. Babies, NICU admission, 337, which is a quarter of the total births. COVID suspect, 204. COVID non-suspect, 204. And COVID suspect, 133. Most of the mothers delivered vaginally. Most of the mothers were asymptomatic. And only one mother out of these 600 suspected died, making it 0.2%. Maternal report for RT-PCR was positive in 145 mothers, which brings it to almost to a quarter. 24% of the total mothers who were suspected were positive. And as I said, only one mother who died. Rest were all discharged, and they were all sent for home isolation. None of them were sent to any COVID facility. And they did not report any morbidities thereafter also. Okay, only 30% mothers were symptomatic, of which fever was the major symptom. Cough was in a very, very number of mothers. And as I said earlier, most of them were discharged except one death. Looking at the babies, 6 IUDs were there out of these 145, 139 live births, of which a quarter were preterm. Those who required NICU admissions were 44 babies. That means almost 30% of the total required admission. 9 babies we have lost during this period. Cause of death has been severe perinatal asphyxia in 6 and early onset neonatal sepsis in 3, of which 1 was MRSA proven. The other 2 had only sepsis screen positive. They had a fulminant course, had pulmonary bleed, and they died almost in like 2-3 hours time from the time that they started deteriorating, and within no time we lost them. 145 neonates were tested, all those born to positive mothers. Of them, 16 were positive within the first 48 hours. 3 supposedly acquired infection later on because their earlier testing was negative, but later on they turned out to be positive. And on the 3rd test, all 3 of them turned negative. And all these babies, 16 plus 3, were all healthy and they were all discharged. So the babies who were actually positive were all healthy and discharged, but babies born to positive mothers had a lot of morbidity, as I showed you, and we lost 9 out of those babies. I think that's all I have to say. And I just say that with the whole team there of your residents, nurses, and counselors, together we can surmount the challenges and take care. Thank you.
So let's move to the next presentation. And we have experience sharing from Delhi again. May I invite Dr. Pradeep Debata and Professor Harish Chelani, Vardhman Medical College and Safdarjung Hospital, New Delhi, for sharing their experiences.
So in the next 5 to 6 minutes, I'll take you through the journey that we in last 3.5 months. And at the beginning, our hospital, that is Vardhman Mahabari Medical College and Safdarjung Hospital, was declared as a dual facility hospital to cater both the COVID and non-COVID patients. And for that, one of our super specialty block was converted to a COVID facility. And there one ICUs and wards were created for suspect and COVID positive patients. But that block had to cater patients from all the age group. And for that, we had to spare our 2 senior residents and three postgraduates to give care over there. And one faculty was also given the charge to look after the pediatric and neonatal patients over there. However, there were no separate delivery area or neonatal care area. So for exigencies, we thought there may come one imminent delivery patient. So we planned ourselves in our own neonatal care area. One labor room was converted to COVID labor room, and initial plan was to discharge both mother and baby if stable within 24 hours. But we are not that prepared for the preterm and unstable babies over there. The plan was to shift those unstable babies to COVID block to the ICUs, either to the suspected ICUs or the COVID positive as the patient turns out to be. So we could not post a resident over this area. Only the resident who were posted in the COVID block had to come over this labor room to attend the deliveries and look after the babies, because we didn't want to mix the COVID resident and non-COVID resident from COVID area and non-COVID area. So this policy was taken. And there was constraint of resident numbers also, because those who were posted in COVID area, they had to go for quarantine for next 2 weeks. So this went on for a month, but at the beginning of May, we could see that the number of deliveries of suspect and positive mothers started increasing. So we felt that there must be proper COVID area to give perinatal care. And this was conveyed to the hospital administration, but with much reluctance, they allowed us to use the 5th floor of that COVID block as perinatal care for COVID mothers and newborns. So we created their separate NICU delivery room postnatal care ward for suspect and COVID positive mothers and neonates. We had a policy to keep the stable babies to mother and to start breastfeeding as early as possible. So this was the structure that we developed: COVID labor room, 6 bed, also the suspect labor room, suspect COVID labor room, again six bedded, and one postnatal ward that was having 12 beds. And we created one COVID suspected ICU having 4 beds with warmer and with CPAP only. Later on, we arranged ventilator from our own nursery to put there. And the COVID ICU for neonates and pediatrics was the common, having 19 beds over there. So we had to spare some manpower for this area. From neonatal side, we sent 3 senior resident, 3 senior postgraduate student to take care of that area. And one faculty was given the charge for the clinical administrative management of that particular area. This is that postnatal ward that was created, and the mother here is giving child. And this is the initial photograph of the nursery that when we were creating this. That is the suspect COVID nursery. So our protocol was each and every confirmed or suspected COVID mother had to deliver in the COVID block itself. And if the baby is stable and no need to transport to NICU, then they are to be nursed with the mother, along with the mother. And the policy was to start breastfeeding as early as possible with all precautions. We could not separate the baby and mother, keeping a distance of 6 feet because of constraint of areas. Those babies who were unstable or preterm were initially admitted to the COVID suspect area, and the policy was if the COVID test comes positive, then they are to be shifted to COVID positive NICU, which was common for both pediatric and newborn. So in the due course, if a COVID suspect mother comes out to be negative, then the diet has to be shifted to non-COVID area, that is our nursery and postnatal ward, in the in the non-COVID area. So our initial policy was to test only the babies who are delivered to COVID positive mothers. And we started testing them in 24 hours, and if comes negative, then at day 5 of life. But later on, as the testing load increases, we only started testing them once, that is about 24 to 48 hours in between. Discharge policy was as per the NICU protocol, common NICU protocol. All the babies who were having COVID positive, all the COVID positive neonates have to be discharged with the mother itself, with an undertaking to follow up at 14 days of life, either physical or by telephone. And immunization, we used to give immunization at the birthing area itself, and no delaying in policy of immunization. So this is the data that we have till 10th of July, that is yesterday. We had 66 positive mothers, and 7 babies were positive, which comes out to be 11%, about 11%. But however, we had 2 newborns were positive whose mother were negative. We don't know whether after 2 testing they were negative, and they were basically asymptomatic. We did test for these 2 babies to have echocardiography done, because antenatally they have shown, antenatal ESG have shown some cardiac abnormalities. So, and there was not a single mortality among the COVID positive neonates. And after telephonic follow-up and some one in physical follow-up, all the babies were healthy and they are on breastfeed. Among these 7 neonates, we had only 2 preterm babies among these 7 positive newborns. So we try to compare the data between the COVID positive and COVID negative children among the first 50 new COVID positive mothers. And considering their mean gestation, mean birth weight, all the morbidities, and the hospital stay, those were comparable. There was no difference between these 2 groups. So with all this, I now request Dr. Harish Chilani to describe all the challenges and how did we overcome all those challenges in the due course. Dr. Chilani, sir.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dr. Pradeep, and thanks, Dr. Devraru, Dr. Praveen. excellent opportunity for the sharing the experiences. During this journey, what Dr. Pradeep described initially in the beginning, but definitely towards the end, we were successful in creating the 2 structures which almost similar to the COVID and non-COVID facilities. As you all know, Safdarjung Hospital is a very busy hospital. Deliveries touch 80 to 100 per day. Of course, during this time, we had around 60 to 80, but still that was a big number. So we did develop the infrastructure. We were fortunate to have a big ICU of 18 beds where both pediatric and neonates were kept. We had the separate areas for the separate labor room for the COVID positive and for COVID suspect areas. So, but good thing was that there was a breastfeeding was done for all the babies, even for the babies who were sick babies. The breast milk was provided from the moms of these COVID positive mothers to the babies. The second important challenge, of course, was the manpower distribution, as was mentioned initially, because you have to run the 2 parallel system, and then some of the people who have to go into the quarantine or the staff going on leave for some time. I mean, that was a real challenge, but somehow we could manage with these 3 senior residents, 3 postgraduates, along with 1 faculty who was there between 9 to 4, and of course on the call. Testing, I think, of the neonate is again a challenge. It's not only getting the test done. I mean, there was a testing which is being done and then reporting from the microbiology department. We developed a system of the reporting so that it gets reported from the main server to the one designated faculty, and that faculty filters the pediatric and the neonatal reports so that these reports should be available to you by very next day, so that action can be taken, because those who are negative, then they have to be shifted to the non-COVID area. So in fact, when we developed the system of testing in our own hospital, the testing goes even till 10 o'clock in the night daily, and then these reports are dispatched very next day. Within 24 hours, we do have the reports. I think the major challenge which came, the convincing the mothers and also the healthcare providers initially about the breastfeeding and the continuation of pregnancy. In fact, many of the moms, the mothers cancel this with the our own milk, because this will be also carrying the virus. So why should we give to our babies? Some of the mothers, they asked for discharge also. So that was another challenge. And as some of the presentation from Maharashtra also mentioned about the, the bedside and the classroom teaching for the newborn group, which we, and the audit meeting, which we daily have at 9 o'clock. Of course, the departmental teaching, that is, we would be continuing with the, show soon starting the meeting. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. So I think with these challenges, what we have seen that following the corrected information guidelines from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and the professional body FOX and NNF and IFP, those some of the guidelines, based on that, we made this flow chart or SOP which Dr. Pradeep showed us. I think because of this SOP, the frequent calls which we, they got reduced, and communication with the healthcare provider very important, and mothers. I think we went inside the newborn unit. Initially, even the nursing people, they were apprehensive that mothers should not every 2 hourly for the feeding. Even in the non-COVID areas, they were apprehensive. So I think these were some of the challenges which we could overcome with good communication, and of course the cross learning from the various platforms, and even today also a lot of learning, cross learning from each other. That's going to be in a long way in this task, which which I know is going to last for a long time. And in the end, I would just say that we have been able to, do a lot in this, and I'm quite hopeful. And thanks to my OBG and other neonatal colleagues who have helped us in making this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. May we invite the next team from Kolkata, Dr. Malik and Dr. Maiti, to take the session further.
Good afternoon, eminent faculties. Myself, Dr. Devashish, a resident doctor in the Department of Pediatrics of NLS Medical College, will now be sharing our experiences regarding perinatal COVID-19 in this tertiary care hospital. NLS Medical Government Medical College had an enviable statistics of conducting deliveries of about 8,000 deliveries in a year, and we did 65 essential beds. It used to serve 3,000 inborns and 800 outborns in a year. But after the COVID-19 pandemic emerged, we saw a dip in the admission rate of the antenatal mothers, along with 61% drop in the essential admission rate. So we planned for an observational cross-sectional study. We tested for about 2.5 months, where we included all the COVID positive pregnant mothers and their babies. We followed an auto testing strategy for the expecting mothers, irrespective of their symptoms, whether they are admitted in the isolation wards or not. And all babies and babies of COVID positive mothers had to undergo the testing. Babies admitted in essential isolation. Babies admitted in essential isolation were also tested up to the age of day 1 by means of RT-PCR, and this RT-PCR test was done from the samples of throat and nasopharyngeal swabs. We had tested 780 mothers, and in this time frame, we had tested 780 mothers whose age was unevenly distributed in between 17 to 35 years, and 28 out of them, that means 3.6% of the mothers, were found to be positive for the COVID-19. Among them, 7.1% had spontaneous abortions, 50% had normal vaginal delivery, and 43% had undergone cesarean section. Most of the mothers, like 23, that means 82% in our cases, were asymptomatic. When symptomatic, fever followed by cough and anosmia were the major symptoms. No ICU admissions or fatality were reported among them. We have tested 274 newborns, including 26 neonates born to COVID positive mothers. Out of them, only one neonate born to COVID positive mother was tested to be positive, reflecting a case positivity rate among the newborns born to COVID positive mother in 3.8%. We also observed that 7.7% of the newborns born to COVID positive mothers are premature and 23% were of low birth weight. Among these 26 babies, one who was positive for COVID-19 was mostly asymptomatic and was discharged successfully. Among the 25 non-COVID babies, one baby unfortunately died of sepsis. We then compiled and compared our data with largest databases from the medical databases, which was compiled by Dr. Walker et al. 666 COVID positive mothers, and out of them, we found that 28 neonates have contracted perinatal COVID-19. So we can comment that the suspected perinatally acquired COVID infection rate is similarly keeping in line with the one scenario, that is 3.8% in our case versus 4% as one scenario. But surprisingly, we noticed a higher rate of spontaneous abortion rate, that is 7.1% in our case, in first time abortion rate than the American data. Our observation is that the neonatal COVID infection is mostly asymptomatic and they usually suffer a non-fatal course. The rest of the presentation will be discussed by my respected teacher, Dr. Asim Kumar Mullik sir. Thank you.
You see that organization of patient care started with segregation of patient. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, we segregate our whole of the patient, gynae obstetric patient in an isolation ward in gynae and obstetric department in a separate floor adjacent to a separate labor room and OT with a bed capacity of 74 and average admission is a 20 per day. We also separate, this is the isolation separate gynae and obstetric ward department. Next is, it is isolation ward of our SNCU. Although we are dealing with both COVID and non-COVID newborn babies, the isolation ward of our SNCU in a separate corner, aloof from core SNCU. Its bed capacity is a triage bed of 5 and isolation is 15, and average admission of newborn is 5 per day. And this is our isolation ward. And the criteria for admission is that all anticipating mothers were admitted in isolation ward because of their testing. As per ICMR norm, we started test with all the anticipating mother after admission. And also we admitted the babies in the isolation ward, all outborn babies and all inborn babies with maternal status of COVID infection being unknown. You see that initially the staff was initially fearful and resistive, who after proper training were convinced and ready to come back radically. And this thing is happened by after repeated counseling, by demonstration classes of donning and doping and sample collection, ward sanitization, chemoprophylaxis of healthcare workers, and proper quarantine facilities when demanded, and moral support from everybody. Next slide. You see that the duty that there is 7 days of duty at a stretch, 6 hourly, 6 hourly, and 12 hourly, followed by 7 days of leave for one court of staff if accidentally they are exposed to COVID positive patient. And clustering of duties as per shift and place of residence for easy availability of transport in lockdown phase. You see that in a leading newspaper, we have seen that there is NRS emerging as a COVID hotspot because more than 60 healthcare workers are affected in our state. Basically, in your now 6 health workers start in your hospital, but strict regulation and isolation in our ward, we can restricted the at least one nursing staff affected in our essential. No doctors are affected, and one doctor and one nursing staff of gynae and obstetric are affected. This is somehow after proper isolation facilities. Most of the doctors are sister escape, and we see that the quarantine also comes down. We have quarantined so far is 8 nursing staff in first phase, then 9 nursing staff in the second phase, and only 3 nursing staff and 1 doctor in essential. You see that our policy or government policy that as soon as the mother positive, then mother and baby should be shifted to the COVID hospital. And out of these, all the mother and baby, we are positive, either mother positive or baby positive. Both mother and baby are shifted in the 2 hospitals. One is MR Bangalore Hospital and another is Calcutta Medical College. And the 6 mothers and babies are shifted to the MR Bangalore Hospital. And the policy is different in both the COVID hospital. You see that in one hospital, MR Bangalore Hospital, all the babies are rooming in and breastfeeding practice. None were infected. And one baby was non-COVID positive, was died, probably due to preterm and sepsis. But in medical college, which is the COVID hospital, largest COVID hospital, they received 20 babies. And out of these 20 babies, all the 20 babies are isolated from mothers and alternate feeding was practiced. And one was infected in our NRS hospital. We are also rooming in before traveling to the medical college. That's why the baby has been affected because the baby and 4 days. CMC, till now, in COVID nursery, they admitted 70 neonates in COVID essential and 10 babies were tested positive. That is, positivity rate in our state, more or less in COVID hospital or medical college is 14.3%. Next slide. Then the question in mind, whether you do the rooming in versus isolation. It's whether rooming in increases risk of perinatal infection or whether maternal COVID-19 infection increases chance of severe cesarean. But telephonic inquiry from parents, especially the father, we ask them whether they like baby to be separated from mother, and most of the parents, basically the father, accepted that if mother is positive, the baby is shifted to COVID hospital. Why the mother baby should not kept together? They prefer that the baby should be separate from mother. Although we know that the preferably breast milk is not an usual route of infection of the baby, this needs to be verified after detecting the presence or absence of COVID-19 in breast milk. Yes. You see that total you have there out of 25,911 total cases as reported by ICMR from West Bengal, we get the 10 neonates who are found COVID positive, that is 0.04% of the tested population. All neonates have been successfully discharged and discharge rate is 100%, suggesting that the lower severity of among them. So our experience shows that in Bengal, the COVID positivity of newborn is among they are more or asymptomatic and most of them survive. So there is no chance of worried about of the healthcare positivity. So what are the challenge faced? Challenge of work, what is essential with available resources, reallocation of staffs, fear of infection among healthcare workers. Basically, the healthcare workers are here and they arranging protective gears timely, face-to-face counseling of parents and acceptability on the part of father while sending their babies with the COVID positive mother to designated COVID hospital, and definitely the social stigma on rooming in with mothers and breastfeeding of babies. You see that the whole solution of the challenge, we solution this challenge that by the some several ways, that due to scarcity of PPEs, our policy is that we can reusable items are used after sterilization. We do a telephonic counseling of parents, and future planning is that the mild cases of COVID positive mothers may be kept in isolation ward with their babies while maintaining hygienic practice. Why to transfer the mother and baby to a COVID hospital, dedicated COVID hospital? And babies born on COVID positive mother will be treated in essential isolation of our hospital, irrespective of the COVID status. I think that our government will do this because no need of transfer of mother and baby because mother admitted they deliver here after 3 or 4 days. There is no need of transfer of mother and baby at a time to the COVID hospital. Next slide. You see that our sisters are the backbone of the COVID treatment of COVID patients, and this I will share